You're watching Scriptease. In today's episode, we'll be looking at how characters change through conflict in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4. You can expect spoilers for the whole series and some graphic imagery. Last time on What Would JoJo's Do, we talked about how to create obstacles for your characters to overcome. When character objectives collide with obstacles, they generate conflict. Depending on the magnitude and variety of obstacle, the character may not have the skills necessary to overcome it as they currently exist. That means to succeed, they need to change, and those who can't adapt die out. Storytelling through conflict is an analogy for survival and evolution. The type of change a character undergoes varies in complexity. For the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to use three broad categories: technical, emotional, and philosophical. Technical change is when the character gains a new skill or item. It might be a weapon that they can use to carve their way through an alien onslaught, or it could be a martial arts technique which allows them to defeat the guy who burned down their dojo. Changes of this nature are rarely satisfying by themselves and are usually representative of an emotional change. Emotional change is when a character's mental state shifts or their relationship with another character changes. Obtaining a weapon or learning a martial arts technique could be symbolic of the character's newfound confidence or renewed drive to defeat their opponent. Philosophical change is much deeper than emotional change, requiring an alteration in the way the character perceives their world and how they choose to lead their lives. Perhaps the Defender of Earth decides to work on a peace deal with the aliens instead of choosing war, or the fighter decides that revenge isn't worth sacrificing his life for. These categories form the hierarchy of change. The character will first try technical change, then if that fails, they'll try emotional change, and if that still isn't sufficient, they try for philosophical change. I say try, but I should make this clear. The character's goal isn't change. Their goal is to overcome the obstacle, and in doing so, the result is change. Alternatively, at any step, they may fail to change, which would lead them to tragedy. As discussed last time, obstacles in JoJo's are fight scenes. Through a fight, one or both of the combatants will change in some way that resolves the fight. It could be that one of the combatants is defeated, or perhaps that the combatants resolve their differences. But whatever the case is, there will be some personal change affected. To see how the hierarchy of change looks in action, let's ask that all-important question: what would JoJo's do? The most basic level of change is technical change. There are very few examples of pure technical change in any story, but in this case I've picked Kira's development of the ability Bites the Dust as an adequate exemplar. Backed into a corner by Hayato, desperation and the power of the arrow give Kira a new ability. Now I'll leave the JoJo theoreticians to discuss whether Bites the Dust is actually Killer Queen Requiem, but I will say that Bites the Dust does follow the Requiem rule. The arrow gives the standard new power that suits the user's strongest desire. In this case, Kira wants to live in secrecy with his identity never being discovered, and so Bites the Dust resets time whenever his identity is revealed. This is purely a technical change. Kira's goal is still to keep his identity secret and to keep killing women. The only difference is that now he has an ability with which to do so. A technical change like this might seem a little bit Deus Ex Machina, but the fact that it makes the protagonist's goal harder means that it doesn't feel so cheap. But I digress. Point is, Kira's objective is to evade capture, and the technical change of developing Bites the Dust allows him to achieve this objective. Stepping up a level, we have emotional change. Emotional change involves a mental shift in the character regarding their opinion of themselves or someone else. This is where change starts to get engaging for the audience, as our opinions of the character on screen change alongside theirs. The best pure emotional change in Diamond is Unbreakable comes as Josuke and Joseph are trying to find the invisible baby Shizuka. In the course of trying to save the baby, Josuke has been less than impressed by the senile antics of his absentee dad, Joseph. Of course, most of the audience know and love Joseph, and seeing Josuke form the opinion that he's just a stupid old geezer really pulls at our heartstrings. When the pair lose Shizuka in the water though, Joseph shows off why we love him so much in the first place. He sacrifices himself by using his blood to color the water so that Josuke can find Shizuka. Even without his stand, Joseph proves himself to Josuke in that one moment and finally earns his respect. Although it's not a battle scene, the fact remains that as Joseph and Josuke work together to keep Shizuka safe, Josuke undergoes an emotional change to view Joseph with admiration. Typically, a technical change will be accompanied by an emotional change. Acquiring a new ability is usually the external goal, which first requires an internal goal to be satisfied. When Josuke joins Jotaro to hunt down the rats with stands, Jotaro spends a moment teaching Josuke to use Crazy Diamond's strength to fire projectiles. Josuke later goes on to use this projectile firing skill to kill both rats that had been struck by the arrow, thereby gaining a new string in his bow. In this way, Josuke has certainly undergone a technical change. But the episode isn't just about Josuke practicing a new skill, it's about Josuke learning discipline, confidence, and patience. When Jojo first teaches Josuke the skill, he emphasizes the importance of accuracy over speed, explaining that when hunting a living target, you only get one shot. Josuke's ability to heed this warning is put to the test when hunting down the second rat, Bug-Eaten, under the immense pressure of saving Jojo himself. Josuke knows that he can make the shot, he has the skill to do it, but the obstacle isn't physical, it's mental. He has to believe that he can make the shot, to have faith in himself. We the audience know that Jojo is the best teacher for how to stay cool under pressure, and watching Josuke learn to do this for himself is a great moment of emotional change, tempering his power and anger with steely resolve. Even better, it's a 2-for-1, as Jojo also emotionally changes, learning that he can rely on Josuke. Lastly, we have philosophical change, where the character's way of life changes from their conflict. In the past couple of emotional examples, Josuke's way of life didn't actually change. He respected Joseph because Joseph's actions aligned with his already existing standards for respect. Similarly, although he gained more confidence from his experience hunting Bug-Eaten, learning to trust himself was never an ideology he was opposed to, simply one he hadn't realized yet. A philosophical change requires a complete upheaval of the way a character previously thought about things or did things. As grand as that may sound, there are actually a plethora of examples in Diamond is Unbreakable. Many characters that begin as enemies of Josuke and co undergo philosophical changes to become allies. Shigechi decides that friendship is worth more than money. Yuya decides that saving someone in peril is more important than self-preservation. Of course, not everyone who becomes allies with Josuke and co change philosophically. Kobayashi remains greedy, and Hazamada remains a petty geek. These two only side with the others because they're too weak to oppose them. The best example of an enemy turned ally undergoing a philosophical change is Rohan. When we first meet Rohan, he's incredibly interested in how things work, why people do what they do, and what motivates them. But he approaches all of this as a clinical observer, keeping himself distant from people and locking himself away to draw manga. In fact, the degree to which he has isolated himself made him awkward and obsessive, even twisted in some respects. Ugh. Over the course of the series, however, we see Rohan open up to people, gradually becoming less self-involved. After Josuke gives him a beatdown, Rohan takes a shine to Koichi and makes friends. When he discovers that as a child he was saved from Kira by the ghost girl Reimi, he then takes on the responsibility of tracking down Kira as well. Rohan's fight with Highway Star proves that even though he doesn't like Josuke, he's willing to sacrifice himself to save someone else. When Rohan is attacked by Cheap Trick, he puts his trust in Koichi to save him, which pays off. After his first encounter with Bites the Dust, knowing he's going to die, his last thought is of letting Koichi know Kira's new identity so that he might be captured. While Rohan's initial motivation may have been simple curiosity and Kira's murders, over the course of the series it becomes clear that he wants to save the townsfolk and his new friends, even if he wouldn't admit it. Last episode I described Kira and Josuke's motivations as such. Both characters want to lead a worry-free life, but while Josuke wants to share this life with his friends having fun, Kira wants to seclude himself away where he won't be disturbed with the detached hands of his victims. You can think of Rohan as lying somewhere between Kira and Josuke. At the beginning of the series, he has a similar twisted nature to Kira, where his fascination with people comes not from his interest in their well-being, but from morbid curiosity and obsession. Throughout the series though, he decides to share in the lives of his friends, place his trust in them, and ultimately seek justice for Kira's murders, not just for the challenge of solving the crime, but because he genuinely wants Morio to be safe. Koichi. Koichi changes on all three levels, morphing from a shy, meek boy into a strong, confident man, even if he is still a shrimp. Koichi follows the arc of most shonen heroes, growing physically stronger and gaining new abilities as he becomes mentally tougher. Koichi's technical change is obvious. His stand, Echoes, evolves over time, gaining completely new abilities, each one stronger than the previous. But each technical change results from a growth in Koichi's maturity. In other words, each technical change is accompanied by an emotional change. The first of these is when Koichi gets kidnapped by Yukako and is made to play the part of her boyfriend. Prior to this encounter, Koichi lacks so much self-confidence that he thinks Yukako asked him for a drink just to get money from him or change her duties at school. He doesn't have the balls to say how he actually feels, and once Yukako kidnaps him, he feels unable to get angry at her for acting insane. Instead, he just pleads for his freedom, cries about his situation, and wets himself. Woof. But he makes a decisive shift here when he resolves to escape and finally tells Yukako that he hates her with Echo's effect. By taking action against Yukako, Koichi shows that he's not willing to get pushed around by people. As a result, he grows mentally stronger and Echo's evolves into Act 2. Thematically, Act 2's power makes his sound effects have physical effects, which reflects Koichi's own shift from using his words to backing his words with action. The second time Echo's evolves represents a similar emotional change for Koichi. Having learned to fend for himself, Koichi has grown arrogant. When he doubts Jotaro's judgment, his pride and fear get in the way of making the right decision, and he ends up endangering Jotaro's life. As he tries to flee with Jotaro's body, Koichi once again matures by choosing to stand his ground and stop running from his problems. His anger overcomes his fear and turns into determination, leading him to a short-term victory over sheer heart attack using the careful observation which Jotaro suggested. As a result, Echoes evolves into Act 3 and gains a new ability. Once again, this new ability is thematically appropriate. Just as Koichi learned to stand his ground, Echoes Act 3 is able to stop enemies in their place. We even get a moment of acknowledgement from Jotaro that Koichi has grown. Even though he got physically destroyed by Kira, his willpower was stronger than Kira's until the last, allowing him to discover Kira's identity as a symbolic middle finger. I could go through a whole discussion about Koichi's maturity being analogous to puberty and the pressures of becoming a man, taking charge, and so on, but the metaphor is already pretty strained by Echo's evolutions. Suffice to say, Koichi's philosophical change comes about as a result of the trials he endures with Josuke and the others. Instead of meekly bumbling through situations and looking to others for help, he decides to stand up for himself and protect others. From everything I've said so far, it seems apparent that interesting characters are those that undergo change to overcome obstacles. But I want to take a moment to show why that's far from the truth. Certainly, change in some respects is interesting, but just as interesting is having some traits, or even entire characters, that remain consistent instead of changing. The classic example here is the antagonist or villain. Rarely does the antagonist undergo a philosophical change during the course of a story. The reason for that is simple. The antagonist's philosophy must remain constant until the hero is able to disprove it, typically at the climax of the story. The very fact that this philosophy is unwavering is what makes our anticipation of it being broken so exciting. If the villain just decided halfway through, oh yeah, actually the hero was right, then there would be no conflict and the story would end. In the case of Jojo's, Kira's desire to lead a peaceful life is unwavering. He never realizes the atrocity of his actions. He never realizes that his peace causes pain and suffering for so many others, and he never brings anyone else into his lifestyle. His only ally is his father, who, similarly, never changes his motivation, unerringly looking out for his son. There's also a case to be made for other characters having traits that don't change, but that's a topic for another video. Watching a character encounter obstacles and attempt to change forms the basis for story. Whether they succeed or fail in changing can lead them to victory or tragedy, but the satisfaction is in the journey. Last time we learned that the better we understand the obstacle in the protagonist's way, the better the audience can connect with their struggle. In this episode we learned what the audience is connecting to, the character's attempt to adapt, improve, and ultimately to change in the face of an obstacle that would have defeated their previous selves. The more the obstacle demands this change, the more rewarding the transformation is for the audience. Good writing and good luck.